progress have you seen from Higgins this season, and what does it take to go from a wide receiver in college to a tight end in this level?
It's a big transition. I think he's done a really nice job of, leaning on the guys in that room. Ben Steele's done a great job of kind of preparing him and teaching him the technique and helping him make that transition. And I think he's done a really nice job. I mean, certainly, he shows up in the passing game. You see those receiver skills, the ball skills, the run after the catch, just the feel he has in the passing game. But I think his effort and his fundamentals in the run game have really made strides over the course of the year. Certainly, he always is going to be continuing to look to improve in that area, but he's done a nice job making that transition.
Injury, we haven't heard what's the latest, but could we see Psychovitz maybe get some snaps at some point next week?
I think we're going to work through a lot of that, as you said, with the injury this week, figuring out where he is, how healthy he is, who else in the room can provide those reps. I think it can come from a lot of different areas, so going to kind of keep an eye on that as we go through the week.
How hard is it to prepare during the week with Hollywood's health situation, hoping that he's going to be out there for whatever snaps it is, and then it doesn't turn out to be that way? How tough is that to prepare?
It certainly creates some challenges. I think it's something in this league you got to be ready for. So it's nothing that, you deal with it at every position. Guys are nicked up, they're not practicing, they're practicing limited. It also is an opportunity for other guys to get reps and start moving around and jump into different roles and be prepared to play, which I think is great for some of their development. You see that from some of the younger receivers, some of the other guys that haven't gotten as many reps. But obviously it is what it is. It's great that he's fighting through it and being out there when he can be out there. So really pleased with that, and just got to continue to work through that as we get through every week, kind of like we talk about with the tight ends.
I know Jonathan was saying earlier this week that in the moment of the game, especially when you guys are moving the ball, you're not thinking about, the wide receivers aren't getting a lot of targets. Do you notice that at all, or is it something you look back at later and say, this is kind of interesting?
I'd say mixed, and it certainly, as you said, it depends on the game. Like if we're really rolling, we're putting up points, we're moving the ball the way we want to, I don't think it really crossed your mind too much. And then there's certainly a moment where, like, to me, it's more like, hey, is Hollywood like your top guys? Like, are they touching the ball? Are they impacting the game? And if not, in the course of that game, we might have had that conversation. Say, hey, let's call these two plays to get him the ball. Sometimes it goes there, sometimes it doesn't. I think Kyler's doing a nice job of making sure the ball is going where it's supposed to and not forcing the ball to people, which I think is an important part of playing the quarterback position. But I think it's more something you look at after and say, all right, hey. Was that the case because of the scheme, the plan, what went into that? Was it the way we wanted to? If so, great. If not, all right, how do we correct that moving forward?
Why do you think the tight ends are getting so many more targets than the receivers?
And certainly in this week, big zone team that puts a shell over the defense, so you want to work inside. And then I think they've made, when their numbers have been called, they've done a really nice job of making plays. And sometimes it's late in the progression. Like they may be third or fourth in the progression, and Kyler's doing a nice job getting through. And then those guys are doing a great job when the ball was in their hand of making the most out of those opportunities. I mean, you saw Trey and Elijah, body adjustment, catching away from their bodies, staying on their feet, doing some really nice things in the passing game. And so, that, when you have success, you're going to, continue to see the ball moving forward.
Coach, when you're looking at film, do you get just as pumped up about Amari with the block on Bosa as the big run that he had? I mean, do you kind of look at those things like those are two really big plays that maybe one was not as noticeable as the other?
Certainly get very excited. The touchdowns usually excite me a little bit more. But no, it was a big play. I mean, his physicality, the ability to do that. I mean, actually, Rondell did that in the first matchup against them on the other side. So I think that's something we take a lot of pride in, those guys embracing that role, doing a great job in that. And so always excited when those guys play at that type of level physically.
With a guy like Higgins, how much more emphasis do you have to put on, I guess, just blocking in general, knowing that he's making that switch as opposed to the other tight ends in the room like McBride or Swain?
I think it's more from his emphasis than it is ours, if that makes sense. So, like, we coach the technique, we emphasize it, and then we say, hey, make sure in your extra time that this is the area you need to make the biggest jump in. Like, you excel in the other areas. Let's work on some of the areas of your game that maybe aren't where you want them to be yet. This is how you do it, and then a little bit of that onus is going to go on him to make sure he's doing that, and I think he's done a nice job of that.
Seems like the one area that Kyler and Trey have not been on the same page with are kind of throws in the middle of the field. Why is that? Kind of how do you fix that? Is that just more reps and getting used to playing with each other?
Yeah, I think, and again, it's the course of a game, the sample size gets so small that like one or two misses are like, hey, we're not operating well in that area. I think we felt that throughout the week and during practice, those two guys are doing a really nice job, really in all areas of the passing game. So have no hesitations in terms of the route tree that I would ask Trey to run or Kyler to throw.
How much of that, with a lot of times, is the sense of, especially when maybe the quarterback thinks he's going to keep going or sit, Trey's not. How much is that just a matter of playing together and just having a sixth sense between each other.
Yeah, huge. I think as you said it, like it's relative to the coverage. So like, is Trey seeing the same things Kyler's seeing? Is the space the same way? Are they getting to the same spot? And then the pass rush plays into that, and knowing where the throwing lane goes into that. So I think it's all of those things kind of play into making sure you're hitting those when the time comes in the game.
Is the run game clicking about as well as it can right now?
I think we're always going to look to improve, no matter how, whether we run for 200 yards or 80 yards. I think there's always you're going to go back and watch the tape and be like, wow, we were really good here, here, and here. We could have been better here, here, and here. And I think the game on Sunday is no different than that. So I think our mindset was, hey, continue to do what we're doing really well. You guys are doing a great job blocking this. He's doing a great job running that. And then as we move forward, if we want to get to where we want to go, we got to clean this up, and this is how we're going to do it. I think that's got to be your mindset, even when you're having success in an area.
Amari was talking about it yesterday, about just sort of the different roles or skill sets that the running backs have. You feel kind of the same in terms of every guy. James can kind of do it all, I guess, but the other guys that all seem to have like something that they do really well.
Yeah, I think that's what makes that room dynamic. I think it's why you see all those guys in the game. The nice part to me is, to some extent, all three of them are pretty solid in every area, which is very unique. I mean, they've all shown up on third down. They've all made plays with the ball in their hand. They've all caught balls out of the backfield. So when you get three guys that can do it at the level those three guys are doing it, I think you put some stress on the defense, knowing that we're going to be able to keep them fresh, that nobody necessarily, obviously James is going to get the majority of the reps, but if Michael or Amari jumps in there for 15, 20 snaps, there's not going to be a massive drop-off in terms of what we're asking those guys to do and their ability to execute.
On Amari's touchdown, as you're on the sideline, are you going, how the heck did he get out of that? And then watching it on tape, what did you see from that play and how it unfolded?
Yeah, the big thing is, like, when the play's called, I take a look at the look, and I also am kind of going through my mind. I'm like, all right, what's my next call, right? So it's like, all right, I'm expecting, I got to be ready for. You rarely are prepared for the explosive. Like, I'm never like, oh, this is going to go for 40, and I got to be ready for my first and goal call. So I think it's you kind of see him going to the pile, and all of a sudden you kind of hear the crowd, and you're like, I kind of looked up and was like, oh, he's gone. Like, it's over. Like, I don't even have to call another play. So, and then as you saw it on tape, I mean, he did a great job. And the guys in front of him, just the effort to maintain blocks. Anytime you hit a run like that, somebody out on the perimeter is engaged with their guy down the field. And I think that's a big part of the run game and allowing us to be explosive, is making sure that it takes all 10 other guys, the quarterback included, to make sure that we're doing that to spring runs like that. So I think you saw that on that play. I think both wideouts to the left were locked up in the perimeter and gave him the clean lane, and safety took the wrong angle, and he made him pay for it.
There were a few games this year where Kyler has spent a long time afterwards at his locker, just kind of thinking about what happened. And Izzy's been kind of a big part of that too. What kind of resources will Ford been for Kyler since he's come back in those situations?
Big. I think anytime, the best time to rehash or talk about a game is when you've just finished it. Like, it's freshest in your mind, what you liked, what you didn't like, what went wrong, where we could have been better. So I think they do a great job of kind of hashing a lot of that stuff out right after the game, and then making sure we're in the right mindset through that night, coming in the next day as we're watching the tape to make sure we're getting the most out of it. But I think certainly that's a big part, post-game, win or lose, that you put so much into it. There's an emotional, letdown when that game ends, because it's finally okay, it's over. Now we need to go back and learn from it, make sure we're getting better. And I think the two of those guys do a really nice job of that together.
You mentioned offensive line, especially on that run, but just generally staying on blocks. How I know you're not an offensive line coach, but how difficult is that to kind of drum into guys? You always got to stay with it.
It's big.
A lot of times you leave a guy, boom, that guy makes a play.
100%. And that's the nature of the beast. The play is never over. You got to run your feet. You got to finish your block. For O-linemen, and it's sometimes harder on the perimeter. Like, linemen take so much pride in that aspect of their game, for the finish, the chase the ball. Hey, we teach it from a ball security standpoint. Like, hey, if that ball does come out, we need more guys around the ball than everybody else. It's a defensive. You hear guys, hey, we need 11 hats to the ball. Right, we need that on offense. So it's certainly drilled from the day we start playing. That's run game, pass game. When that ball's in the air, when it's moving downfield, we need to be chasing it or finishing your blocks, because that's what allows for big plays, and it also allows us to make a play if something does go wrong.
When you take a big picture look at this offense since Kyler came back, is it where and what you had envisioned, or is it kind of a work in progress because he's kind of a work in progress since he's been back?
It's a good question. I think to some extent it's always going to be a work in progress. I don't think at any point as a coach and hopefully as a player you're ever going to say, yep, we got it, we're good, we're exactly where we need to be. I think that's the key to making sure that you're always progressing in this league and trying to put your best foot out there on Sunday. So it's, we've done some things really well, he's done some things really well, and there's a lot of things we need to improve on, himself included, myself included. So I don't think that mentality, that attitude's ever going to change.
What stands out about this Bears run defense, and why Why has it been so effective?
Combination of players and coaching. Matt Eberflus is an unbelievable coach. He does a great job coaching that defense. He's had success everywhere he's been. And certainly they got players that fit that system, that play hard, that play it at the level he wants it to. They're really disciplined in their run fits and really aggressive. And they got a dynamic front seven that really makes it go. So it's going to be a challenge.
Does the weather, I don't know if this probably not your decision, but does the weather have anything to do potentially with Hollywood's availability? If it's supposed to not be really cold, but still it's going to be cold that not used to.
As you said, certainly will not be my decision. I would say if he's ready to go, he'll be out there. But we're going to work through that this week.
How much more do you prepare for that cold weather, or just getting the balls wet, or all of that? Is that more applied this week than it has in the past?
It's a good question. We hit on it a little bit earlier. In terms of wetness, I think that's something you work on. Like, hey, if it's going to rain, we have to be prepared for that. In terms of cold, I would bet 99% of the players barely notice it when they're on the field. So it's like one of those things, hey, this is going to be the weather, guys. It is what it is. They're playing in the same weather we are. Here's what we need to do. I really don't think, and I could be wrong, you can ask them, but I really don't think it crosses their mind between the white lines. Like, I think that's probably true of just about everybody out there.
How beneficial is it to have a guy like Kyler when you're going up against a guy like Justin Fields?
Yeah, I think Justin Fields presents a lot of issues on his own, and it takes a lot to prepare for how dynamic of a player he is. It's hard defense going up against their offense. But yeah, he's a really dynamic player, and just like our quarterback is.
When you met with your defense on Monday, anything in particular you stressed based on watching the film, this last game against the Niners?
Like always, there's a handful of things that when you lose a game like that are going wrong, from scheme to technique to all the little details. And I actually kind of wrapped up the meeting of, hey, what was the overarching theme there? There really wasn't one, right? There's a lot of different things that we need to get better at, and we need to take today to learn from this tape and then go apply this on Wednesday at practice and meetings, all of that, get ready for Chicago. So, anytime, it really in any football game, whether you win it or lose it, if it felt great, if it felt terrible, there's always different layers of things that need to get improved on. And you always have to be looking at it on a Monday, on a Tuesday with no emotion, but a very critical viewpoint of how can we get better at coaching it? How can we get better at getting the players to execute it better? And everything like that. So, that was kind of the message as it is every Monday, no matter what the result of Sunday's game is.
What happened on the two plays where guys were left wide open?
Yeah, a couple of those things where ultimately it always starts with the coaching, whether it's a schematic thing or it is a detail of within the scheme, hey, how do we execute it better? So a combination of all those things ultimately always starts with coaches. Hey, how can we, whether it's, hey, how can we make the scheme better? We make the rules better so that sort of thing doesn't happen. Or, hey, man, we should have been good there. How do we get the player to be able to recognize that and put themselves in position to make that play? So a combination of those things, but ultimately coaches we got to be better as coaches to get that corrected, and the players got to go execute it.
When we asked Jonathan about that yesterday, he specifically talked about the eyes being right. Can you go into a little detail?
Well, I mean, yeah, like, Jonathan's talking about eyes. That really is the start of your process, right? That's one part of processing is your, what you see with your eyes. Obviously, there's things that is tactile, things that you feel that help you process, especially when you get down in the trenches. But everything starts with your eyes as far as what is my assignment, what is the offense doing, and how I need to respond to what I'm getting. So when he's talking about eye discipline, he's talking about, did we see what we needed to see correctly in order to trigger the correct response within what our scheme is versus what they were giving us. So when he talks about eyes, that's the first part of our sensory process that triggers our actions that carry out what we need to do within the scheme.
I know Petrell had gotten back in the lineup for a couple games, but those were also the games Antonio was out. Was that just the move back to Petrell going back to special teams, and was just a case of Hamilton coming back to the lineup and it was just going to be his spot?
Yeah, I mean, like week to week, we look at it. Obviously, Ham's done a really good job when he's been in there, and he's deserved his opportunities, and he's made the most of them. Something week to week that we're going to continue to look at and put out the guys that we feel like give us best chance that week.
I know sack numbers aren't always the best indication of pass rush, but how would you assess these last 3 games?
Yeah, I think every game is different. It starts with ultimately the quarterback that you're going against and how you need to affect him in the pass and the pass rush. And then, scheme plays a role into that, into how you want to rush him, how you want to pressure him. Depends on their protections, depends on the route concepts. There's a lot of things that go into that. So every week can look different. Sometimes you're throwing it all at the quarterback. Sometimes you're not rushing a lot of guys. Sometimes you're simulating pressure. Sometimes it's a 4-man rush game. So everything can be different. Each game probably has a little bit of a different story on if you want to, hey, how can we affect the quarterback more? I think there's going to be layers of that, of winning one-on-ones, having better scheme, having a better plan. How do we had to play the quarterback this way because he gets the ball out really fast, or he's a scramble threat, or we had to, we couldn't designate this many to the rush because we had to take this away in the pass game. Maybe it was a player, maybe it was a route concept. So every week that looks different, and just one week at a time. When you look at it, hey, how can we have been better, or what did we do really well? And then this week, to me, it's all about what does Chicago do that's going to influence what we do going forward.
Does it bother you though to end up with a stretch like this, just numbers wise, when you're out of it and you're through those 3 games, or because of all the things you just said, you're just not really thinking of it?
Yeah, wins and losses.
I know you guys are big on like one day at a time, one game at a time. With 3 games left, what do you want to evaluate the most before the season's over?
One game at a time. I want to go get a win this week, and I want to improve. You talk about 3 games left. I want to see improvement week to week, and it starts with right now putting together a good plan, and then tomorrow going to have a good practice and getting better at practice.
When Shanahan was asked yesterday by their media about those 2 plays, he said didn't go into detail, but said there was something they saw on tape. So do you think with what happened in those plays, has that been an issue at other times during the season? Or?
No, those were 2 brand new, unique plays. Yeah.
Do those ultimately get marked down as an ME, as a mental error, because guys were open and just miss an alignment or assignment?
You asking about our grading system?
No, I was curious. Do you ultimately attribute that to a mental error, just with the guy being that open on those 2 plays?
Yeah, like I said, some things are, it's always going to start with the coaches, whether or not it's very clear of, hey, this is what we got to do to stop this, or hey, this gives our rules some challenges. So it's usually a little bit gray, and there's layers to how you can improve it from a coaching standpoint, from a playing standpoint.
Nick, along the lines of the sacks and pressures, when you look at Zaven specifically on the edge, how would you assess where he's at this point and what you've seen through the course of the season?
Yeah, I thought he rushed really well last week, honestly. It was actually rushes inside. We asked him to do a lot of things as far as aligning on the edge, inside, dropping into coverage. So the versatility gives us major benefit as a defense. And I think he's getting comfortable as he continues to get those reps inside and outside. Because if you think about it, he doesn't continually rush off the edge every single down. He doesn't continually rush inside every 3rd down, right? He has to do so many different things. So you can see it as just, hey, he's really getting comfortable now. I saw those rushes inside. He was comfortable doing them. I see it every week at practice. He's improving on the things that we want him to improve on with his edge rushes, with his technique, everything like that. So I've seen improvement throughout the whole year, and I think he knows he's got a lot of things he continue to get better at, and he's going to continue to get better at them.
What's the next step for him, growth-wise?
I think it's every element of his game. There's not one thing that you say, hey, Zaven, do this, and it's everything's great, right? There's things he needs to continue better at in the run game. Like we just talked about his pass rush, and for his position, he is a very good cover outside linebacker, and there's things that he needs to continue to get better at there too as well.
What is being called and how often it's being called as personal fouls in games? In meetings, do you have to talk to guys, about being careful with that? And also on the field, is there some coaching in terms of, how you want them to hit?
Yeah, JG does a really good job of covering that every week. We go through, rule reminders, and we look around the league at situations where those personal fouls get called for hitting, and we review our fundamentals on how we avoid those penalties and really play in a safe way, which is what those rules are designed for. So, JG does a really good job, and us coaches, we reiterate all those things that we talk about as far as lowering our target, how we got to approach a quarterback in the pocket, so on and so forth. But we go through that every week.
How do you teach, and what do you teach when a player's momentum is taking him to that point of no return, where he's going to hit the guy, hit the quarterback just because of how fast he's going?
Yeah, we call those bang bang plays where it's happening really fast, all of a sudden bang, contact's right there. We really emphasize on getting your target correct and ultimately having the correct fundamentals in a very fast situation where you don't want to, for your own safety and the other player's safety, if you don't want to be dropping your head or anything like that, because that can lead to some bad stuff. So, we harp on being able to suddenly lower your target. Whether that was Sunday, with Gardeck's play, he's kind of felt like he was, oh man, the quarterback's all of a sudden scrambling. He's there very fast. All of a sudden, bang, bang. The more he can try to lower that target right there, even though it is so sudden, the better. So you're not hitting the quarterback up around his the head and neck area. So that's a huge emphasis, the fundamentals of it, but also suddenly lowering your target.
Aside from how dynamic Fields is, what else do you see from this Bears offense?
Yeah, they're running the ball really well. I think the scheme is very, very adaptable and versatile, because what you got is a team that can just very old school, get under center and run outside zone and run duo right at you, and they're very efficient with it. But then they also have a quarterback that can create a +1 in the run game, and that adds a whole nother element. So it's really kind of a versatile offense in terms of what they can do in the run game, because they're not just dabbling in outside zone and duo. That's what they do. That's what their identity is. They're very good at it. But then that element of quarterback, the numbers change, and they take advantage of it. And they're doing a really good job using him just enough to keep defenses honest, and he's going to get his big plays through the run or QB scrambles. So they're doing a really good job in the run game, and obviously in the pass game, quarterback's a major threat with his arm and his legs. So you have to be able to mitigate those explosives that he creates on his own.
It seemed like the Niners were not, at least in the start of the game, were not going inside the tackles. They were trying to keep everything outside. How well has your front seven been playing on the interior?
Yeah, I think, there's things we did good and there's things we need to improve on. A couple of those runs hit for more than they should have, and that comes down to, playing better technique than the opponent and winning your one-on-one. And then they come back to those runs and we're stopping them for nothing. So it goes to show you, hey, when we play with good technique, this is what the result can be. It's a matter of being able to consistently play with that technique. It's not just up front. That's the back end in coverage too. You have to be able to consistently play with good technique, know what you're supposed to do, being able to process, have your eyes correct, in order to continually win one-on-ones in this league.
With Fields' size and speed and his willingness to run it, does it help having played Lamar Jackson earlier in the year? Are there similar challenges?
Yeah, possibly. I think it's good to look back and see, hey, what other quarterbacks have ability like that. Not a lot of people have that ability, but they present their own unique challenges, and he's his own player. And I think every week you just approach what you got in front of you.
When you have young corners, how do you help them from getting picked on by quarterbacks?
Yeah, that's not necessarily something that we go into a game with the mentality of how do we not get picked on. I think everything is predicated off of what we feel like our strengths are, and what they do schematically, personnel-wise, who's really good, and how do we have to affect the quarterback and take away what they do well. So that's more of the mindset to it, and that affects what we set up for the game plan and how I call the game.
Obviously, the replay showed the guy's arm was down, so you don't get the touchdown. And you've been doing this a long time, so it is what it is. But is there any part of you that gets bummed out when that unit makes a huge play like that and it just ends up not counting? I mean, obviously it would have been a big deal, but just on a personal level, like, hey, it would have been nice to get that for our guys.
Yeah, I mean, it's right before the half. We had to punt, so we didn't, score, and got a chance to close it, potentially tie the game at that point. So that's a disappointment. It's nothing like, oh man, the guys who were on the punt unit, it's kind of a team thing. So I guess that's as good as I can describe it.
Do you feel like you have to say anything extra after a play like that to get the guys re-engaged, or is it just next play mentality?
It's next play. I don't feel like in a play like that the players like go in the tank. They're disappointed that we didn't create another turnover. We've had a couple of those this season. The guys know how valuable those things are. The flip in field position, potentially scoring on that play. I mean, there's a lot that goes into it, but I think they get more excited knowing how close they are rather than, if it was just if we would have tackled the guy at the whatever yard line, because it wasn't just his elbow going down. I mean, part of the reason why the guy started going down is because Dortch is torquing on his arm right there. So they know they're close on those things.
With Blake and how you analyze him and how you look at how he's doing, do the numbers mean anything to you? Is it way more than that? Is it just circumstances on where his punts are landing in whatever situation it is? Kind of how do you analyze how he is doing?
There's a lot of things that go into it. Efficiency with handle time, direction, distance, hang time, plus 50 punting, minus 50 punting. The emphasis for those weeks. You don't punt to the returner the same way all the time. There's a game plan that goes into it, and we've got an idea of how we want to play certain teams, and different things come up. But we look at everything. I think the most important thing with your punt team is your net punt. How far is the ball exchanging when it's flipping the field? So he's got a strong leg. I know his gross is pretty decent, has been decent. That was kind of Andy's strength as well. And the net part of it plays into coverage certainly factors, hang time usually factors, and there's just a lot of things that can affect the net penalties. You see a lot of punts that, it's not the net that factors in. Like you don't get a 70-yard net for a 60-yard punt that is flagged. You get the 60. It negates whatever return they may have, but the field position part of it. So that's the exchange that we look for in the punt and punt return stuff. And then with kickoff return, we look at the start point.
Do you pin the net on the punter, or is that just something completely out of his control?
I don't think it's completely out of his control, but I think that the coverage parts of it factor in. The hang time factors in the direction. Did it go where we wanted it to go? How close to the sideline is it if we were to go directional? In the plus 50 stuff, one of you guys asked, Darren, I think it was you, against the Rams, we have a great hang time punt. Well, our gunner in that play overran it, right? So that has nothing like if he's 5 yards, 10 yards past the returner, certainly the hang time would have been good enough on that particular play. But sometimes it's bang, bang. A guy catches it and he's immediately hit and, kind of spins out and balances himself. So it's not completely on the punter. He's certainly a factor, though.
How much has your job changed generally in coaching guys with the fact that kickoffs are hardly returned anymore?
Not at all. It's because you get this question. I get this question in the offseason. I get this question from people around the building, get this question from other coaches like, hey, if this guy's going to kick touchbacks this week, why don't we spend a little extra time on this instead of kickoff return? Well, then you get in a situation where somebody has a 15-yard flag, and they're kicking off from the -20, and that can be a huge play for your team. And to minimize it, I think would be a disservice to the team. Now, the things that I think you see more and more of teams doing is limiting the menu of returns that they may have up for a game. So 10, 15 years ago, where there's 6 kickoffs in a game and all of them are staying in play, or maybe there's 1 touchback, you're probably not running the same kickoff return 5 or 6 times in a row. You're probably going to have 2, 3, maybe 4 returns up in a game. As I'm looking at film, it certainly looks like teams around the league are saying, this is our return for this week. If we get a ball, this is what it's going to be. And so it kind of shrinks it down that way. But I think you have to still coach those units, especially kickoff coverage, because you're not in control unless the kicker puts it out the back of the end zone on what